How this turns out is entirely up to us. I'm Jessica Denson, and this is Lights On. Welcome to Lights On. As mentioned in the title of this show, I have some breaking news on impeachment to share with you, including a poll, a brand new poll that shows a plurality of voters in swing states are in favor of impeachment and removal. This comes just on the heels of the Impeach Trump Again petition that Lights On has been instrumental in gaining momentum and signatures for, crossing that 1 million signature mark. That happened just this week. We have waiting on deck the president of free speech for people who hosts that petition, John Bonifaz, great friend of the show, incredible fighter in this moment for our Constitution and our democracy. I'm so happy to have John on the program tonight to share that news with you. As I mentioned at the top, this is up to us what happens here. This is yet another week of unthinkable, egregious authoritarian overreach, just as Donald Trump is refusing to use the FBI to go after blatant bribery by his border czar, Tom Homan, something that is caught on camera, this man receiving tens of thousands of dollars in bribes prior to taking his position. As they shut down that case, they weaponize the Department of Justice to go after their political enemies in this brazen political prosecution of James Comey. They are trying to designate nonprofits and left-leaning organizations as terrorist organizations in an unlawful, again, brazenly illegal executive order that Donald Trump put out this week. But look at what is happening just in the case of Jimmy Kimmel and that censorship. Just today, of course, Jimmy Kimmel is back on the air this week, but not all of the stations were airing his show. Nexstar and Sinclair, the ones that kind of started this whole thing by saying they were going to take him off air last week in light of those mob-like threats from Trump's FCC chair, Brendan Carr. Today, Nexstar and Sinclair have caved. They are going to be returning Jimmy Kimmel to their stations where they have been preempting him all week. This is the effect of pressure. This is the effect of boycotts. This is the effect of refusing to be complicit or to accept this kind of lawless censorship and assault on the First Amendment, assault on our freedoms, our fundamental freedoms as Americans to criticize our leaders. And I want you to just take this one example of Jimmy Kimmel and him being returned to the air this week, and those blockades from those other networks or those company owners that were keeping him off air. Look at the way that pressure worked and just see what has been accomplished, and imagine what could be accomplished with the pressure we have not applied in other areas. And of course, I am talking about impeachment and removal. This is absolutely our right to demand impeachment. It is absolutely the constitutional necessity of this moment. John is going to come on with us in a few minutes and go over just a few, I think they're up to 25 impeachable offenses that they have outlined at impeachtrumpagain.org. There is a litany of impeachable offenses. Our Constitution is not written so that the more it is violated, the less we enforce it. It is absolutely normal and imperative for this man to be impeached and removed now. Now, we also just this week, had a Democratic lawmaker say that she is going to introduce articles of impeachment against Robert F. Kennedy, the absolute loon who is running the Department of Health and Human Services under Donald Trump, with this insane kind of connection of Tylenol to autism and these insane cuts to public health and trusted public health leadership that are happening in that department. So there is another push for impeachment that we're going to talk about today. I have some thoughts myself about impeachment of cabinet officials when we're not focusing specifically on impeachment of Trump, but I'm very much looking forward to that conversation. We also have coming up soon in the next couple of weeks, another Representative Delia Ramirez will be joining us in the next couple of weeks. She's someone who has been very outspoken about being pro-impeachment and in favor of impeaching and removing Trump. I actually went on another program on Dean Obadala's show a few weeks ago and shared some comments that had been shared with me that her staff was actually less favorable and kind of pulling her back from the more public statements that she had made in favor of impeachment. And I was actually able to speak to her staff this week when they reached out to me and told me she would like to be on the show. And they asked me to correct that. They said, no, our staff is definitely not against her impeachment push. We support her in it. I'm very much looking forward to that conversation with Delia Ramirez. I'm looking so forward to really growing this movement. As you know, it has been a singular focus of the Removal Coalition, which I founded and which has been both using this show and your activism and involvement from home, as well as literally on the ground protests and lobbying of Congress to hone in on this demand for impeachment. So I'm really looking forward to growing that coalition amongst lawmakers. Representative Al Green has been an amazing leader in this respect, but he should not absolutely be standing alone on this. Other members should be filing their own articles of impeachment. They should be forcing votes. And I feel like we're really making progress in this respect. As I said, look at the progress we've made where the pressure has been applied. And I say we, meaning like the country at large, where the main focus of attention has been. Just imagine what we could accomplish with the attention being focused and mainstreamed on impeachment. That's why I know that this is so important. It's so vital that we not think that this is some impossibility or think that the more that this man violates the Constitution, the more that we have to retreat or wait, or that we have the luxury to wait for midterms that could very well be interfered with to make this happen. So I am on top of this. My guest today is 100% on top of this. I want to actually share one other thing for you before we welcome in John, and that is my ongoing battle that you have known about for years if you have been following me. And if you haven't, I will briefly bring you up to speed. I am here on this show, Lights On, and in this space of activism because years ago, going on 8 years ago, as a pro se litigant, I decided to bring a lawsuit against the Trump campaign for my own, so I could live with myself, so I could have any credibility moving forward in the world and not let a horrifically misogynist and unjust and just defamatory sabotage of my identity and my worth as a woman that I experienced 8 years ago working on the Trump campaign, go pass under my watch without taking action. And I decided 8 years ago to sue them. That was followed by a political awakening. It was followed by years of activism, even when nobody was listening. Long before I had this show, I was screaming from the rooftops about Donald Trump's attacks on free speech. You know, it's been very kind of curious for me to see these new discussions about Trump's hypocrisy on the subject of free speech, because for so many years, in particular in his first administration, when he claimed to be a champion of free speech, so many people took him seriously. And I was a living example. I was the canary in the coal mine of what this man would do to prosecute people who spoke out against him. He used his campaign as a cutout during his first administration to go after me for expressing my rights as a free citizen in a lawsuit and in a tiny little Twitter account at the time, which had 32 followers. This man came after me for $1.5 million. At one point had a $50,000 judgment against me that he tried to use to bankrupt me and send me into oblivion. And I did not balk at any one of these at any one of these intimidation tactics. I fought back at every step of the way. And because of it, as many of you know, in the end, we had an extraordinary victory where we freed every single person, not just me, but every single person that had been bound by these illegal Trump NDAs that were signed by his staffers in 2016. Now, the reason I'm bringing this all up right now is for two reasons. One, because it has been so relevant just over the last few weeks. My reliving what I went through and seeing how people are finally waking up to what this man does to censor his critics. And this is a fundamental tactic that authoritarians use. If they can silence the conversation, if they can silence the truth, if they can control the narrative, that is how they gain and retain power. And so free speech is absolutely fundamental. And just as all of this is finally surfacing in a way that people finally seem to be taking seriously, just how dire the attacks on free speech are, I myself am dealing with an appeal of my underlying case that has been going on for many, many years, that was thrown out by a judge in this New York State court just weeks after Trump took office again this year. Now, I need your help, and I've said this before, and you have been so wonderful in coming to my support when I have asked you, and I'm going to do it again because I genuinely need it for this appeal, which is I'm working right now on getting new counsel, as I shared with you a few weeks ago. Again, I've periodically shared this with you. My counsel that was on the initial case is not following through with me on this appeal. I am needing to hire new counsel. This is an expensive fight, and there is no way that I am going to abandon it after all of these years. I'm going to talk about something today about impunity from one of the world leaders at the UN. And to me, this whole crisis that we are dealing with is a crisis of impunity. We are in the situation that we are in because there have not been consequences. There has not been a cost for people to pay for all of the violations that we have experienced from this illegal regime. Pam Bondi had the audacity to say when the indictment of James Comey came out that no one is above the law, when Donald Trump has been treated time and time again like he is above the law. So my case from day one has been a individual insistence from this woman, from me, to say, no, I am not going to let this injustice pass on my watch. And that is why, after all these years and having fought this and having had this case thrown out, there is no way I'm going to abandon it. So if you want to support me, you can do it at thejessicadenson.com/donate. I thank you so much for that support. It means the world to me, and it is what is going to enable me to continue this fight. So thank you so much for that. Also, just thank you, everyone, as always, for being part of Lights On, for being part of this movement. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Jessica Denson YouTube channel where you're watching this. I will tell you, I think that suppression on this platform is a thing. I have seen it not only with my own channel over the past few weeks, I've seen it with other genuinely pro-democracy content that seems to be not getting the attention and circulation that it should. So please subscribe to this channel. Please share this video. Please put on your notifications. Thank you to all of the members of this channel. You are the reason that I keep this going, and you make it possible. Thank you so much for your support. The work we are doing here is vital, and the message needs to be shared. So thank you so much for making sure that it is not silenced. Please join me in welcoming my friend to the show. As always, such a pleasure to have him on, John Bonifaz. John, welcome back to Lights On.
Thank you, Jessica. Great to be back with you.
Great to be with you. And I want to talk, first of all, you know, John, the Lights On audience has been so instrumental. I mean, I think we've been talking about this since day one of this administration to get people to sign your petition at impeachtrumpagain.org. And just this week, you announced that you finally at Free Speech for People, along with Women's March, who's been a wonderful partner in this, got over the 1 million mark of signatures. And that's all of us there back in July in DC, when we were very close to that threshold, delivering those petitions to Congress with Representative Al Green. John, just tell me about this moment, what it's like to reach this threshold.
Well, we're thrilled to have passed the 1 million mark of people all across the country demanding that this lawless president be impeached and removed from public office. And you're right, Jessica, you and your viewers and listeners have been there with us from day one. And we have grown this campaign. I know a lot of people, they look at that number and they say, well, we've got many, many more millions in this country. How is that an important number? But when you look at what petition campaigns ultimately generate, it's actually quite astounding, particularly when you factor in that there's been no major mainstream media coverage of this and no major push in the United States Congress other than from our champion, Congressman Al Green. So people have found out about this through podcast shows like yours and organically online, and they are hungry for people to stand up and demand that our Constitution be followed at this critical moment in our history. Accountability, as you have highlighted, is such a critical part of our democracy. If you don't have accountability, if you have people who somehow think they're immune from any kind of accountability, then you really have a walk or march toward tyranny. And that's where we are right now with this current lawless president. He thinks he is above the law. And the Constitution has a specific remedy for dealing with somebody in the Oval Office who acts like that. The framers were clear about this. There would be no monarchs, no tyrants who would govern America, no kings in America. They set out to ensure 3 co-equal branches of government. Article 1, establishing the United States Congress. Article 2, establishing the presidency. Article 3, establishing the judiciary. But then they also set out an extra guardrail, and that's Section 4 of Article 2, the impeachment clause. Yes. And it's to deal with this very moment of a president who would so trample on the Constitution, so trample on the rule of law, that we, the people, through our elected representatives in Congress, we need to impeach and remove him from public office. That's where we are today. And we have been documenting, as you have highlighted, at impeachtrumpagain.org. Our team at Free Speech People has been documenting the multiple abuses of power this president's been committing since he took that oath of office on January 20th. We're up to 25 grounds for impeachment. And the abuses of power grow every day. I mean, every day we see this president trampling on the Constitution. But what this petition shows is that people are ready to stand up and demand that we protect our democracy and demand that those in Congress who have taken the very same oath that Donald Trump took to protect and defend the Constitution, that they have that sworn duty to now do that and invoke the impeachment power. And that's what we're demanding with this campaign.
Absolutely, John. And like I said to you, I think on a show a few months back, the only reason, as you said, that this doesn't have millions and millions of signatures is because more people don't know about it. It's a failure of the media, frankly, that this is not even more popular, but it's a massive accomplishment with the limited exposure that it has had to get over this threshold. And it's really, John, and this is a conversation we've had so many times. This is what the people want. This is what the country wants. This is the heartbeat. This is where public sentiment is. And you did you released the results of a poll just this week, a poll conducted by Lake Research Partners, commissioned by Free Speech for People, that shows that a plurality of voters in swing states are in favor of impeachment. John, can you kind of go through the results of this poll with us?
Yes, I mean, this is extraordinary. And in fact, Lake Research Partners, which is a very reputable polling firm, says it's a remarkable result, and in their view, potentially unprecedented, that you have in the very first year of a president's term, you already have this kind of support in swing congressional districts. So what this poll demonstrates is that a plurality of voters, 49% to 44%, support impeaching Donald Trump already. Again, without a mainstream media focus on this, without the case being made through impeachment hearings in Congress, they're already there. And then when you look at the approval rating, it's not that far different. 56% disapprove of Donald Trump in these swing districts. So we have to remember, right, that these are the districts that members of Congress look to determine who will gain control, assuming there are midterm elections in 2026, that Donald Trump, as you highlight, doesn't interfere. These are the swing districts. And for those members who say, oh, well, that's not where the voters are, we have to wait out the next election. We hope that they'll look at this poll and they'll see that they're wrong about that assumption, that even in these swing districts, the people already know that there are abuses of power for which this president should be impeached and removed from public office for. There was a prior poll that we've discussed on an earlier show that was done in April of this year by a different polling firm, ASO Communications and Research Collaborative. They showed nationwide 52% support for impeachment, 84% of Democrats, 55% of independents, even among Republicans, 20%. And what they said in that analysis of that poll is that those numbers matched the level at where the people were at the height of the prior to impeachment trials against Donald Trump. So when we consider the fact that at those times there was already this case being made publicly in the airwaves, in the print media, via the people in Congress, that was happening at those times, and yet the public is already there. Now, look, I'm not shocked that they are already there, and I know you're not either, because it's in broad daylight. These abuses of power in broad daylight. This isn't about Watergate, where things were put hidden under the rug, and the tapes had to be revealed, and they discovered there was a recording going on of all these conversations, and then those came out and became revealed. Donald Trump says this publicly. He says, that he wants to see one of his adversaries, James Comey, indicted. And so then he fires or tries to fire the person, resigned, but a veteran federal prosecutor leaves because he knew that Donald Trump was about to fire him. And he did so knowing that there was a statute of limitations coming up early next week. And that if they didn't indict before this statute of limitations, 5 years after this testimony where they allege falsely that James Comey committed perjury before Congress, if they didn't meet that deadline, then there wouldn't be any possibility of getting an indictment. So they rush this, right? They get the person in that office, U.S. attorney in that office, a veteran prosecutor whom Trump had nominated to be there in the first place. They remove him, and then they put in a lackey, somebody who has no prosecutorial experience.
Yeah, former Miss USA contestant.
Right.
Those are the qualifications.
Right, and they put her in there, and then they go before a grand jury, and we learned this evening that out of the 23 jurors, they barely passed the threshold of 12 jurors having to vote to indict. They get 14, and they don't even get them on the 3 charges that they wanted. One of them, they don't even win that indictment. So this kind of vindictive prosecution needs to be thrown out of court immediately. That's what needs to happen to demonstrate to Donald Trump that this is not the way it goes with respect to the prosecutorial process. And that, I think, is going to likely be a motion before this federal court that's now overseeing this, which is that, frankly, this is a vindictive prosecution. It was clear from the moment he said to Pam Bondi, you need to act and act now. And they move ahead and get the veteran prosecutor pushed aside and bring in this person with no prosecutorial experience. That all is clear to light as day for everybody to see. But, it's not just that abuse of power. That's the most recent, obviously.
Yeah.
It's just happened. But it's the disappearing of people off the streets and sending them to foreign torture prisons. It's the illegal kidnapping, detention, and removal of U.S. residents. It's the mobilization of the United States military in our cities to try to squelch public dissent, to try to stop any voices being heard against this rogue agency, ICE. It's the attack on the United States Congress for doing its duty of appropriating money, a power that it only has under Article 1 when Donald Trump freezes these trillions of dollars of funds. This is a usurping of Congress's authority. It's the attack on the judiciary, defying multiple court orders issued by federal courts all over the country. It's the abuse of the pardon power, where he pardons 1,500 of his fellow insurrectionists for an insurrection that he incited to try to stop the peaceful transfer of power. It's the rampant corruption in the White House, the selling of the White House, using the Oval Office as a profit-making enterprise at the public expense, the violation of the emoluments clauses, foreign and domestic emoluments clauses. All of this is clear to the American people. They see this, they know what's happening. And that's why I think these polling numbers show where they are. And that's why wherever we are, when people find out about this campaign, they're like, where do I sign? Get me on board. And we're going to keep moving with this, with your help and your listeners, with Women's March and all of our allies. We're going to keep fighting to demand that Congress do its job, uphold and protect the Constitution at this critical hour for our nation.
Yeah, John, as you mentioned, the Comey prosecution is just the latest. This is just the latest of a growing list. I mean, sometimes I think like you said, it's all out and open. And in the first administration, there was at least the attempt to pretend like there was a separation between the presidency and the Department of Justice. I mean, it almost seems trite to think back to Joe Biden and how meticulously that man tried to separate himself from Merrick Garland when so many of us were just like pleading for maybe just a public comment about the salvation of democracy and like the need for accountability for January 6th. And we now have this explicit. Donald Trump puts out a message to Pam Bondi, literally telling her we need to get on this prosecution of James Comey. By the way, in that comment, referencing impeachment. This is one of many times he references impeachment. Yes. Mind you, this man has gotten the Smithsonian to remove references to impeachment. He has taken references from to his prior impeachments out of public records. This is proof that Donald Trump is afraid of impeachment and that impeachment is the most effective tool to have him removed.
No question about it. No question about it. He's afraid of impeachment. He does not like the fact he is the first president to be impeached twice, and he needs to be the first president to be impeached 3 times. And he needs to be removed from office. But, so too do these other characters. I mean, Pam Bondi, she's part of this conspiracy to attack our democracy and our Constitution, and she needs to be removed from office as well. And frankly, she needs to be disbarred for the actions that she's taken with respect to this vindictive prosecution and other actions. There are many people in his cabinet, in his government, who need to be removed, but we are focused at the top here because Donald Trump is the insurrectionist in chief. He's the liar in chief. He's the one who's abusing the office and needs to be facing accountability. And, we understand. We understand that the votes may not be there this very moment in the United States House of Representatives, but that is not the reason why we should therefore sit on our hands and not invoke this demand. We need to build this case.
Yes.
We need to build this case every single day. And Congressman Green was the first champion, but we need other champions as well to step forward, to draft their own articles of impeachment. We've got plenty of language they can borrow or copy, frankly, plagiarize all you want from Impeach Trump Again.
The work has been done for you by John and the amazing lawyers at Free Speech for People.
Take it and run with it and draft and put your own articles of impeachment in there. But don't just introduce those articles. Do what Congressman Green did. Invoke House Rule 9. This is the area where an impeachment resolution is considered a privileged resolution and can go straight to the floor. And we understand that Jim Jordan, who's chair of the House Judiciary Committee, he's not going to allow this to go through the House Judiciary Committee right now. That's why you've got House Rule 9. Invoke that power, send it to the floor, and force a floor vote. I had a member of Congress say to me recently, well, what do you want? You want us to, on Tuesday, introduce articles of impeachment and have a vote then on Wednesday? have another article impeachment and a vote then on Thursday? And I said, yes.
Yes.
And that's what we want. We want a daily confrontation of this with respect to the impeachment power. We want a daily debate, and we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can talk about, cuts to Medicare, cuts to Social Security, all these other things that are policy debates that need to happen, while we also protect and defend our Constitution. Each and every time one of those votes happen is a vote for accountability. And those who are going to be on the sidelines and vote not to advance those articles of impeachment, history will record them for that vote. But 78 members of Congress, when Congressman Green did this in June of this year, 78 joined him. That was quadruple the number that had been on record before that vote. And we know those numbers will grow because their constituents will continue to make their voices heard and say, where are you at this critical moment in our history?
Yeah, I want to take that a step further, John. I think that anyone who is not only backing impeachment, but not being proactive, and this might sound harsh, but not being proactive in impeachment and removal, filing their own articles, forcing their own votes, is complicit in the destruction that is going on right now. And complicit in any violence that may come because we were not willing to use the constitutional means that prevented us from that violence. Or complicit in Donald Trump refusing to leave office because we know he refused to leave office peacefully the last time, and we're living in a fantasy land if we think that he's going to do it this time. They're complicit in everything that is going on when they are in that body. I don't care if you have the votes by appearances right now or not. You and I have said a million times, and Al Green has echoed, it's not their job to honor the Constitution and uphold their oath when they have the votes. It's their duty every single day. And you look at, just look at, for instance, the subject of Jeffrey Epstein and how effective the messaging has been on that, how effective the coalition building, how they have gotten certain Republicans to move over the aisle, and they now, with this week's special election, have the votes to force a discharge petition on the Epstein files. Just look what can be done with sticking to a narrative, not letting go of it, pushing the public conversation. I mean, isn't that what leaders are supposed to do? Aren't they supposed to lead and frame the narrative and frame the conversation?
Absolutely.
I just don't think there is any excuse for them not to take action. And not only that, but they're complicit in the destruction of democracy by standing down right now.
Look, silence is complicity. Now they will say in response to what you just said, well, I'm not being silent, I'm speaking out. But let's look at what they say. They get out there, they say, this is authoritarianism. This is dictatorship. They give the diagnosis all the time, but they don't give the remedy. They don't give the remedy. The remedy is impeachment. This is the nonviolent response for how we address this march to tyranny. We're going to invoke that power that the framers put in there into the Constitution. And this is a nonviolent movement, obviously. All this effort by Donald Trump and his cohorts to claim that political violence is happening because of the left. I mean, this is just a way they are trying to weaponize this horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk and use it to go after their enemies. It's outrageous, and we have to call them on it. But the way we call them on it is via the impeachment power. That's how we call them on it. We say these are abuses of power. We call them high crimes for what they are. We name these actions for what they are. You had a comment in your opening that it is normal and right, effectively, is what you said, to start impeachment. And that's absolutely correct. What's not normal is to somehow treat these actions by Donald Trump that he's taking as matters that we're not going to reference the I word as often as referred to as impeachment. We're just going to be quiet about it. That's what happens is we then normalize his actions and make it seem like that's somehow acceptable. It's not. And the way we do this is we name these actions for what they are: high crimes against a state for which he must be impeached and removed from public office.
Absolutely. A few minutes ago, I was sticking up on the screen accidentally something I wanted to bring up eventually, and I will now. And that is this obscene executive order where Donald Trump is trying to label Antifa, which is really has never been a formal organization. It literally short for anti-fascist, which I think most of us in this pro-democracy space would ascribe to being anti-fascist, has this very broad language to enable people to be labeled as domestic terrorist organizations. Now, once again, John, with my NDA battle, this was very, very familiar, because one of the things about that NDA that I killed in court was there was this clause that says anything that Donald Trump deems confidential will be confidential. This complete arbitrary kind of guideline where there is no actual law, no actual, rightful guidance for how these kind of determinations are applied. And they basically are at the whim of the dictator wannabe in the White House and his lackeys. That is the only determination as to whether an organization gets determined to be a terrorist organization and the consequences for the individuals and organizations involved.
Yes, and I think it's very important that you name that NDA as a clear example. You can draw a through line from there to this kind of executive order. This is an attack on the First Amendment. It's a direct attack on the right to freedom of speech. We do, as you said in the opening, have the right to criticize our government. We have the right to speak out. We have the right to say that what they're doing is wrong. And there's nothing under the First Amendment that allows Donald Trump to say, I'm going to name you a terrorist for saying that. Anti-fascists is what we all are. We're all against fascism. We're for democracy. We're for our Constitution. And so as Donald Trump continues this march to tyranny, the remaining question here for all of us who care about our country, our democracy, is where are those members of Congress who have taken that oath of office? They're the ones who have that power to speak out and make clear that this is a high crime. This executive order is a high crime against the state. We will not tolerate it. We will not accept it. I understand that there are going to be some people say, well, let's challenge this in the courts. Look, I think that's important too. Litigation is important, but we cannot put all of our emphasis there, because that frankly takes the members of Congress off the hook. They're going to be like, let's see what happens before this federal judge, let's see what happens before the federal appeals court. They have a duty to stand up. Yes. And, I am frankly very tired of reading these comments by members of Congress who say, this is like dictatorship, this is like authoritarianism. And then they don't keep going with that thought, right? Well, where do we go? If this is a dictatorship, if this is authoritarianism, what is your response? And your response can't be, so let's all wait till November 2026. That is not the response.
No, it absolutely is not. And I love the comment. Actually, I'm just going to share a couple of comments just from the last few minutes. Timothy Snyder, of course, he's the author of Armed Tyranny, and that chapter that is the motto for Lights On, Stand Out, which means so much to me, because I think it's just really the behavior that we all need to be modeling in this moment, and is standing out. And so many people, John, have modeled that behavior recently. Timothy Snyder was on air just a few hours ago, and he was talking about how we can now present ourselves in ways that show power. I think that showing up at these protests is a huge part of that. And we're going to, at the end of the show, talk about how the Removal Coalition is actually branding the upcoming protests and why your messaging at these protests is so important. It's what we've done with the boycotts and making sure that they return Jimmy Kimmel to air. He talked about just how fluid, and this is kind of something I've touched on so many times, is the finite period of time, John, that we have to address this. Right. We don't have the luxury of time to just deal with this, as you're saying, at some future point, and how our choices in the next few weeks, in particular, just in the next few weeks, will make such a huge difference. Kind of on that theme, and he also talked about just being ourselves and being true to ourselves. I don't know about you, John. I shared this in a church service this week. I have felt the need to genuinely focus on my own happiness, my own individual happiness, to not let my joy be robbed from me during this time. And I think that's so vital. Like, don't let them steal your
Yes.
identity. Don't
Mhm.
let them steal your joy. Be happy in the midst of this. And it goes right in line with being fearless. And one thing James Comey, when he came out and spoke yesterday in response to this and talking about the faith he ultimately has in the judicial system, he quoted his daughter, who we
Yes.
know, Maureen Comey, was fired from the Justice Department recently. And this is what she wrote in the wake of her firing. She wrote, "Fear is the tool of a tyrant, wielded to suppress independent thought.
Mhm.
Instead of fear, let this moment fuel the fire that
Mhm.
already burns at the heart of this place, a fire of righteous indignation at abuses of power, of commitment to seek justice for victims, of dedication to truth above all else." John, I just feel like that fearlessness and joy really need to work hand in hand in this moment, and that if they do, they are unstoppable.
No question. I fully agree with that. And I'll tell you, we know and we are inspired by all of the people all over this country who stand with us in demanding that we protect our Constitution, our democracy at this critical moment. And I do take joy in knowing that there are people all over the nation who are willing to stand up. When I was part of that petition delivery with you and Congressman Al Green and many members from Women's March and Alexandra Flores Quilty, our campaign director, I heard that a neighbor nearby where we live had learned that we were about to deliver these petitions, and his remarks were, "I'm glad they're delivering my signature. I'm glad they're delivering my
Mhm.
name on that list." And
Yeah.
that I think resembles where people are. They want to be heard. They want to stand up. And we, as we have said this clearly, and we have a message for Donald Trump. We are not afraid of you. We are not afraid of you. You are a lawless wannabe dictator. You have committed high crimes against the state. We will hold you accountable. You must be impeached and removed from public office. We need to say that to ourselves. We need to say that to members of Congress, and we need to say it to Donald Trump. And we are going to remain fearless and with joy in this fight for our democracy and our Constitution.
Yeah, we absolutely are. I will just, while you're with us, John, because John has showed up with us at many of these protests. We were together, of course, at that petition delivering, and John was with us on Good Trouble Day, where Representative Green was and gave an incredible speech. You think you know John by watching the show. You got to see John live and in person at one of these protests, because you're on fire when you speak to a crowd. And I love that your theme in your speech, John, is always about not being afraid. That is something that you repeat over and over again. And I think in a way throughout this, that has been one of my major consolations, even though the lack of bravery and courage and needed action from our lawmakers has persisted. The people have been incredible, John. The
Yes.
people standing up, the people being fearless, the people looking at the militarization of our streets and laughing at it and
Yes.
making just pointing out the utter spectacle and
Yes.
ludicrous nature of what Donald Trump is trying to do to this democracy. The spirit of the American people, frankly, in light of all of this, has been a beautiful thing to witness.
No question. And you know what? Donald Trump knows that that's where the people are. And that's
Yes.
why he's so scared of
Yeah.
them. He's scared of accountability. He's scared of elections. He knows that the people are not with him on this. So he's going to do everything he can to try to effectively seize that power in an anti-democratic way. And we're not going to let that happen. And we're going to stand up and we're to defend our democracy.
Yeah, we absolutely are. And I want to talk to you before I give the announcement about what the Removal Coalition has going on coming up. I want to talk about this RFK impeachment, because I know this is something that you called for, This was announced just this week by Democratic Representative Haley Stevens of Michigan. She said yesterday on Thursday that she would introduce articles of impeachment against RFK Jr. due to, quote, the healthcare chaos under his watch. She wrote, healthcare chaos, reckless cuts, rising costs. Michiganders and families across the country are paying the price for RFK Jr.'s agenda. Enough is enough, which is why I'm drafting articles of impeachment against Senator Kennedy. Now, I know Free Speech for People had just recently started your own campaign for the impeachment as well of RFK Jr. in particular. Can you tell me why you did that and what you think about Representative Stevens' announcement this week?
Well, we're thrilled that Representative Stevens is doing this. We have launched impeachkennedynow.org, where we are calling for impeachment proceedings against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as Secretary of Health and Human Services. He's completely unqualified, and he's engaged in his own impeachable offenses, effectively firing the vaccine panel and putting his own lackeys in there who are total anti-vaxxers, endangering the health of the entire country. Coming out, as we've seen recently, with this whole claim around Tylenol and its claim links to autism, when the science is not saying any such thing. He's an anti-science, anti-vax, completely disqualified Secretary of the Health and Human Services, and needs
deeply
to be
troubled individual. I mean, that's what I mean. Like, can we just step back for a minute? I mean, if you look at someone like Donald Trump and RFK Jr., this is like a cycle of abuse. Like, these are people who are not mentally stable, being put into positions of leadership. It's unthinkable.
Yeah, it is. But I will also add that at the same time that we launched impeachkennedynow.org, to be consistent with where we are on this, we added to our Impeach Trump Again site a section on other key Trump officials who also ought to face impeachment. So while we haven't launched those petitions yet, it's very clear to us, and we document this on that site, that Secretary Kristi Noem, the Department of
Homeland Security.
Thank you. And overseeing ICE, that she needs to go. Pam Bondi, the U.S. Attorney General, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and all of his actions that he's taken, including, being part of, with Pete Hegseth, these illegal bombings of boats in the Caribbean without any declaration of war, any kind of congressional authorization that Donald Trump's been ordering. All of this are abuses of power, and they need to be held accountable as well. But we aren't taking our eyes off the clear focus here, which is Donald Trump, his abuses of power, his impeachable offenses for which he must be held accountable through the impeachment clause.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because when I think obviously the entire administration needs to be removed. We can go back to why this entire administration is illegal based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, barring any impeachable offenses that they may or may not commit. So listen, my intention from day one has been to have the entire administration removed. That said, I will say, John, that anytime I hear, when I hear a focus on any of the people under Trump, I'm a little bit hesitant to put too much effort behind that, simply because I think the need to get everybody on board for Trump is enough. And we can't, just to play devil's advocate for a minute here on the cabinet level impeachments. I mean, to think that we could put all of our eggs and all of our effort towards impeaching a cabinet level official and not succeed there, it seems like that might dampen and even further discourage these cowardly lawmakers from pursuing impeachment of Trump. And that's why I kind of feel like, we need to start at the top.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. And we're very cautious about, making clear that we're not taking our eyes off of the focus of impeaching Trump. But, we do think that naming these other individuals for the high crimes they've committed is necessary. But we're with you on this basic point, that there should be no letting up of the heat on members of Congress for doing their sworn duty in invoking the impeachment power against Donald Trump. And frankly, including Congresswoman Stevens, anyone who is going to invoke the impeachment power against a cabinet level official needs to be asked, and where are you on doing the same thing with respect to Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned at the top this clip from the UN this week. I know there's a lot of attention on the elevator, which I think was
yeah. The escalator.
was poetic escalator. Yes, escalator. Poetic justice. Whatever caused it, it was poetic justice. And then rightful attention on the people walking out on Netanyahu and all of the war crimes that are being committed by the Israeli government, funded by this illegal administration right now. Also, there was a clip earlier this week from Luis da Silva, the leader of Brazil, and he made some comments. Now, these were basically because of Donald Trump's attempted interference in the Brazilian judicial system, because of their prosecution of their insurrectionist, Bolsonaro, who was convicted for his crimes against democracy. And, it's kind of like, I like to look at the international perspective right now, John, so much, because I feel like the world is looking at us. And I referenced this in a recent speech at one of our major protests. Like, the world is looking at us like, oh my God, America, what are you doing, or what are you not doing? How are you letting this happen? And here he is speaking about Trump's attempts to meddle in their judicial system and how they gave an example of how to stop authoritarianism. So listen to it for a minute to Luis da Silva.
There's a clear parallel between the multilateralism crisis and the weakening of democracy. Authoritarianism is strengthened when we fail to act in the face of arbitrary acts, when the international society falters in defending peace, sovereignty, and the rule of law. The consequences are tragic. Throughout the world, anti-democratic forces are trying to subjugate institutions and stifle freedoms. The aggression against the independence of the judiciary branch of power is unacceptable. This interference in domestic affairs is aided by a subservient far right who is nostalgic of past hegemonies. False patriots plan and publicly promote actions against Brazil. Peace cannot be achieved with impunity. A few days ago, and for the first time in 525 years of our history, a former head of state was convicted of attacking the democratic rule of law. He was investigated, indicted, trialed, and held accountable for his actions in a meticulous process. Brazil sent a message to all aspiring autocrats and those who support them. Our democracy, our sovereignty are non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. Peace cannot be obtained through impunity. Your thoughts, John?
Well, look, it's fascinating to think, why is Donald Trump so focused on this question happening in Brazil with Bolsonaro? Why does he care? And the answer is not just that he's a buddy of the guy. That's not really the answer. The answer is that he's scared that if the world sees, including people in the United States see, how another country properly can hold somebody accountable for inciting an insurrection and trying to overthrow the government, then he knows that he could be held accountable here. That's a model for how we should be carrying out, responsible accountability measures here in the United States. And that's why he wants to interfere in that. He doesn't want that model held up. He doesn't want the world to see it, because he is a tyrant. He wants that to be the way things go in the United States. And he wants to shield the public from seeing anything whatsoever of a different way of dealing with anti-democratic actions, like Bolsonaro's actions to engage in the insurrection there, and like Donald Trump's actions back from the first term in January 6, 2021, and everything that he's doing now. He's attacking our democracy. He's attacking our Constitution, and he doesn't want to have anybody have an idea of how to hold him accountable. But we know how to hold him accountable.
Yes.
Section 4 of Article 2, the impeachment clause. He doesn't like that word at all because it's happened to him twice before. he needs to be impeached and removed from office this time. And, I think that people understand that that's the power we have and we need to demand it.
Yeah, and one more thing to answer our critics out there who think that impeachment is not viable, or here's what I hear sometimes, that they think it's a gimmick. That it's a gimmick. I mean, this is such a perversion to me, John, because there's so much performative stuff being done by Democrats that, as you always articulate so well, is the diagnosis without the remedy. And yet the one time they might use a remedy where they're accused of being performative or it being a gimmick. This is no gimmick.
It's no gimmick. And look, part of the argument that people make is that it's a gimmick. Well, you don't have the votes. But you're not going to have the votes unless you build the case for impeachment.
Of course.
You can't just be quiet about it until you think, okay, now we're going to build a case for impeachment. Let's just take the argument all the way to where some of those are. They're going to say, wait until the November 2026 election. Wait until the potential change in control. Then in January 2027, you can begin impeachment proceedings. You know what that's going to look like? They're going to slow walk that. They're not going to vote to impeach and remove in January 2027 when there's been no case built.
I know.
If we're silent all the way, it's going to take many, many more months. And then guess what's going to happen? Then some people are going to start saying, well, we're in a 2028 presidential election cycle now. This is not a good idea. We need to put this aside. So the reason why we start this now is because we're never going to get to a place, if we have the votes, for actually impeaching and removing Donald Trump unless we've built that case. And we build that case by calling for it now, by documenting these high crimes, by invoking the impeachment power in the United States Congress, having multiple floor votes under House Rule 9 with articles of impeachment. That's how we build that case. So no, it's not a gimmick. It's the real deal. It's Article 4, Section 2, and we need to invoke it now.
We absolutely do. So on that note, John, I'm going to announce what's coming up. Everybody knows there's a huge No Kings Day coming up on October 18th. The Removal Coalition is getting involved with No Kings Day by branding as many of these events as possible as Remove the Regime. Remove the Regime. We had a massively successful Remove the Regime event on 9/2. That's where we met up outside of Union Station with Flair. We lobbied Congress. We had over 1,500 people go peacefully through the halls of Congress and make a lot of peaceful noise as to why Donald Trump needs to be impeached and removed. We're doing Remove the Regime again on October 18th. We've got our partners in Florida, in Los Angeles, in Washington, D.C., in Alabama, already branding theirs as Remove the Regime. I highly encourage, if you were involved in any kind of organization that is putting on a protest for 10/18, steal our messaging, use Remove the Regime. Having a direct demand in these protests makes a huge difference. It is what is going to translate to the media, that is then in effect going to translate back to Congress. We must have a demand. No kings? Okay, what does no kings mean? It means that we remove the man and the administration that is trying to become a throne of American rulership instead of the democracy and republic that we are. So put in your demand, remove the regime. You can go to removalcoalition.org if you have an organization that's interested in joining, and we will gladly help you amplify your efforts in that. So thank you as always, John, for joining me. It's really a special pleasure because it's been such an honor to be collaborative with you in this work in getting this impeachment petition over that 1 million mark. So congratulations to you, my friend.
Thank you for your leadership and your courage. So appreciate your voice.
Thank you. And thank you to our viewers. I mean, we're here with an audience right now that has been instrumental in making that happen, and some of the toughest fighters. I also want to just give a shout out to some other people that are very much in this fight, and those are our friends at Citizens Impeachment.
Yes.
You can go to citizensimpeachment.com. That's one really great way. Obviously, I want your feet on the ground with me if you ever can make it to a protest, but if for any reason you can't, can't, you can go to citizensimpeachment.com, and they have an incredible network of citizen lobbyists across this country that are pressuring their lawmakers and moving the needle here. And we are going to build this coalition, John. We're getting Al Green. We're getting Al Green the coalition he needs.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you, Jessica, again, for all you're doing to get the people of this country woken up and the need to stand up and fight for our democracy. It's great to partner with you.
My pleasure. Thank you, as always, John. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today on Lights On. I will remind you that you can support this show, as I mentioned earlier, by going to thejessicadenson.com/donate. That in particular is going to help me right now with this appeal against the Trump campaign, where I am refusing to walk away from this and pursuing this till the very end and demanding accountability and not letting this impunity happen on my watch. So again, you can support me there at thejessicadenson.com/donate. Thank you so much for that. Another way you can support this show is just to go to thejessicadenson.com. You can see all of our merch with the standout logo, hats, mugs, t-shirts, hoodies, all of that good stuff at thejessicadenson.com. Thank you so much, everybody, for being with us today. Have a wonderful weekend. And as always, my friends, let your light shine.